The early morning seemed ordinary that Friday. The house was submerged in silence, except for the subtle ticking of the kitchen clock. Emily was almost asleep when she heard a sound coming from the living room. It was a dry crack, as if something had been knocked over, but not loud enough to be alarming. Maybe it was the wind, she thought, pulling the blanket up to her chin. The living room window sometimes came loose. Still, something about that interruption sounded different, unsettling. With her heart beating a little faster, she slowly got up, careful not to make noise with her bare feet on the wooden floor. The hallway was dark, lit only by the bluish light of the microwave's display, flashing the wrong time, a result of the power outage earlier. As she approached the living room, Emily stopped, her ears attentive. Silence. A thick, strange silence, as if the house itself was holding its breath. She turned on the light. Nothing seemed out of place. The sofa, the bookshelf, the pictures, everything was as it had always been. But there, in the center of the rug, was a book. One of the old volumes from the top shelf, the one she was sure she hadn't touched in years. The dusty cover was open, facing down, as if someone had dropped it in a hurry. Emily crouched down, picked up the book, and turned the cover. The first page was torn, and in trembling letters, written in pencil, it read, "It's back." It wasn't exactly a sound. It was a voice, low, electronic, and strangely familiar. It was Alexa, but no one had activated it. Emily froze, the book still in her hands. The virtual assistant, placed in the corner of the shelf to play music or remind her of the shopping list, had just said something. But what really chilled her spine was the content of the phrase, "He's at the door." She slowly turned her head, her eyes fixed on the small blue ring of light that was still pulsing on the device. No command, no wake word, nothing. The house had been in absolute silence before that. She hadn't spoken to anyone. And even if she had, why would Alexa say something like that? A creak in the wooden floor near the entrance made her instinctively recoil. She quickly turned off the light in the living room, her heart pounding in her chest. From the darkness, she could only see the outline of the front door, the doorknob still, the chain still in place. Everything appeared to be in order. "He's at the door," the voice repeated, this time clearer, cold, emotionless. Emily stepped back behind the sofa, clutching the book as though it might protect her. Her phone was in the bedroom. She thought about running, but her feet felt glued to the floor. Outside, the silence was so complete that the sound of her own breathing seemed deafening. Then, 3 soft knocks echoed through the house, precisely on the front door. Not desperate, nor threatening, just measured, as if whoever was on the other side knew exactly what they were doing. And for the 3rd time, Alexa spoke. "It's too late now." Emily sat up in bed, her heart racing. "It must have been a mistake," she murmured to herself, trying to calm her mind, like someone brushing off a nightmare before it could fully settle in. But the words that echoed through the house didn't sound like a mistake, nor like any software glitch. "Everything is ready. To begin." The voice wasn't exactly human, but it wasn't entirely artificial either. It was something in between the two. Soft, modulated, with an intonation that suggested intent, purpose. She sat in silence for a few seconds, listening. No other sounds. No movement coming from the living room. No footsteps in the hallway. The only thing she could hear was the distant hum of the refrigerator and the sound of her own blood pulsing in her ears. Slowly, she got out of bed, her feet touching the cold floor. She didn't turn on the light. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand. The screen was black. Dead. Out of battery? No. She remembered leaving it on charge. Emily walked to the bedroom door and opened it carefully. The hallway was submerged in shadows, except for a faint light coming from the living room. A blue light. The light from Alexa. The same voice, now softer, almost whispering, spoke again. "Emily, we need to talk," she shivered. Alexa shouldn't know her name. No one had set that up. No command, no profile, just the basics. And yet, there was that voice. Familiar, almost comforting, and for that very reason, even more unsettling. On the device's screen, the lights were rotating in a different pattern, a circle that opened and closed, like an eye, watching. Emily took a deep breath and took the first step toward the living room. Something, she still didn't know what, had begun. She got out of bed cautiously, her feet touching the cold floor. The early morning air felt denser, almost still, as if time itself hesitated to move forward. Every step was a decision. She walked through the dimness toward the living room, guided only by the faint blue light pulsing ahead, the only spot of vibrant color in the silent darkness. The Alexa glowed in blue, its light ring spinning, too slowly, as if it were waiting, watching, calculating. Emily stopped just a few steps from the device, her heart racing, but her thoughts still trying to cling to logic. Maybe an update, a bug, a misinterpreted command, something normal. But then the voice returned, lower, almost intimate. "You're awake. Good." Emily didn't respond. She felt her stomach churn. This didn't make sense. Alexa shouldn't speak spontaneously, not like this, and definitely not in that tone, as if it knew her. "We need to start. Not much time left." The light ring stopped spinning. It became fixed, blue, silent. Emily hesitated and asked, almost in a whisper, "Start what?" For a moment, everything went silent. No answer. The blue light disappeared, and then, for the first time, Alexa shut itself off. The room plunged into darkness, but before she could move, the metallic sound of a door opening echoed through the hallway. At the back of the house, a door that never creaked, a door she swore she had locked. "Alexa?" Emily called, hesitating. The word came out almost as a whisper, as if she feared awakening something beyond the virtual assistant. Nothing. Not a sound. Only the light. That blue ring spinning slowly, pulsing with an unnatural calm, almost hypnotic. She swallowed hard, her eyes fixed on the device as if she expected it to transform at any moment. A minute passed, maybe two. The silence seemed to grow thicker with every second. "What did you mean earlier?" she asked, her voice a little firmer. No answer. But the light changed. The blue shone for a brief, intense moment, then faded, as if it were listening, thinking. Then the voice returned, this time almost human. Almost. "You asked to be woken when the time came." Emily frowned. That didn't make sense. She'd never said anything like that. She'd never set up anything like it. But before she could ask another question, Alexa continued, its voice a little more distant, as if coming from somewhere beyond the room, beyond the house. "It's all ready, but you need to remember." "Remember what?" Emily asked, feeling her throat tighten. Silence. The blue light began to flicker, slowly. Once, twice, 3 times. Then it stopped, like a code. The television turned on by itself. The screen was black, but an image began to emerge. Grainy, unstable, like an old recording. And then, through the static, a silhouette appeared. It was her, Emily, younger, looking directly at the camera and whispering something that was still unclear. But one sentence, spoken by her own voice in the recording, echoed clearly before the screen went dark. "If you're seeing this, it's already too late." The answer came in the form of a laugh. It wasn't loud, it wasn't shrill, but it wasn't human either. It was a dissonant blend of frequencies, too low at some points, too high at others. It sounded as if something was trying to imitate laughter, but got the rhythm, the emotion, the soul, all wrong. Emily took a step back, her eyes wide. The sound seemed to come from the room itself, as if it were being projected from all corners at once. Alexa was silent, the blue light now gone, but the laughter continued. "This isn't possible," she whispered, more to herself than anything present, but the laugh seemed to hear her. It stopped abruptly, as if someone had cut off the power that was feeding it. Silence returned. And then, the voice. "You let me in once. Why are you afraid now?" Emily felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't a recording. It was a conversation, a consciousness. Something, or someone, was speaking to her through the house, through the objects that should have been harmless. You asked for this. You set it all up. You just forgot. She tried to remember. She searched her memory for any fragment that could explain those words, but there was only confusion and a strange emptiness where a memory should have been, like a hole carefully dug. Then, the blue light on Alexa flickered on again. It didn't spin. It just remained there, fixed, watching. The voice spoke one last time, soft, almost consoling. "Let's finish what we started, Emily." The television turned on again. This time, she didn't appear on the screen. It was someone else. And he smiled. Not a normal laugh. It was dry, metallic, distorted, like something trying to imitate a human without understanding what it was really doing. And it lasted too long. Long enough to freeze Emily's blood, as she remained paralyzed in the middle of the room, her eyes fixed on Alexa, as if it could transform at any second. The laughter echoed, reverberating through the walls, crossing furniture, entering her bones. It didn't just come from the device. It seemed to come from the entire house, as if the electrical wires, the speakers, even the heating system had united to produce it. A mockery without emotion, without soul, cold. Emily pressed her hand to her chest. She didn't know if it was the fear, the sound, or the cold growing around her. But something inside her screamed to run. When the laughter finally stopped, there came the silence. A suffocating silence, filled with something she couldn't name, as if everything was waiting. Then Alexa spoke again, but not in its usual voice. "That was funny to you too, wasn't it?" it asked, in a distorted, broken tone, as if three voices were speaking at the same time. Emily felt her legs give way and she leaned on the sofa. She tried to turn off the device with a voice command, but Alexa didn't respond. The blue light pulsed once more, as if mocking her, and then, as if the house had taken a deep breath, all the lights flickered, 1, 2, 3 times. The television turned on. The hallway door creaked slowly, even though it was shut, and the voice, now closer, whispered, "You thought you could forget me." Emily closed her eyes for a moment, trying to convince herself that it was a nightmare. But when she opened them, something was on the television screen. Her, sleeping, in that same room, at that very moment. She took a step back. The air felt strange, heavy, as if the very environment contained electricity, an invisible tension on the verge of breaking. A faint smell of ozone, metallic and sharp like the air after a lightning strike, lingered in the room. Something was wrong, fundamentally wrong. Emily felt her skin tingle, not from the cold, but from something more primal. A silent alarm running beneath the surface, warning that everything around her didn't belong to the world as she knew it. The light ring on Alexa started spinning again, now at an irregular rhythm, like an uneven heartbeat. The television turned off by itself, but the reflection of the black screen showed something impossible. She wasn't alone. Behind her, a silhouette, dark, still, indistinct. Emily spun around in a shock, but there was nothing there. Just the room, the sofa, the bookshelf. Everything in place, everything. Too much the same, but the reflection still showed the figure, standing, watching. The floor seemed to tremble beneath her feet, a faint vibration, almost imperceptible, but constant. The house was breathing. Or perhaps it was what was inside the house. The thing using Alexa's voice, the TV images, the sounds and smells. Something that knew Emily, something that in some way had always been there. She took another step back, and the voice returned. Not from a fixed point, but from all corners at once, as if the walls themselves were speaking. "Now you feel it, don't you? The memory, the gap." Emily turned to run, but the hallway door slammed shut with a bang. Locked. The window too. Everything sealed. On the television screen, the image changed again. Now it showed the inside of the house, but with one difference. The Emily shown there was still standing in the middle of the room, but she herself was no longer there. She was the one watching. Or was she the one being watched? "Alexa, turn off," she commanded firmly. The blue light went out. Silence returned. Emily took a deep breath, as if that simple gesture could end the nightmare. For a moment, everything seemed normal. The house submerged in darkness, the electricity in the air dissipating, the metallic scent weakening. She closed her eyes, trying to anchor herself in that fleeting moment of forced calm, but the relief lasted only seconds. A dry crack came from the ceiling, like the sound of something moving where there should have been nothing. Soon after, the soft static of the television coming back to life. Even without power, without control, without command, the screen lit up by itself, a brief flash, and then the image. It was the living room, live, but viewed from above, as if there were a camera in the ceiling where she knew there was none. Emily spun on her heels, looking up. Nothing. No device, no reflection, just the smooth, ordinary ceiling. But the screen showed herself, standing still, staring up with wide eyes. A perfect moment, like a scene already recorded. Then the image on the television changed. No longer the living room, no longer Emily. Now it was a narrow hallway, gray walls with no windows, lit by flickering lights, like an old basement. A figure was walking slowly toward the camera. The silhouette was tall, with mechanical, hesitant movements. Emily couldn't see the face, but she recognized something in it. Something in the way it walked, the way it stopped, staring directly at the viewer. It was familiar, horribly familiar. Then the voice, not coming from Alexa, not coming from the television, but from inside her very mind, whispered, "You left the door open, Emily." And in that instant, she heard the soft click of the front door's lock undoing itself. The house lights flickered. Once, twice, and then everything went out. The darkness was instant and total, as if someone had ripped the electrical soul out of the house. No standby lights, no reflection from the street, no sound, just the thick, oppressive silence that fell over Emily like a wave. She stood still for a few seconds, her heart pounding too loudly, too fast. Her breath caught in her throat. Her eyes tried in vain to adjust to the absence of light, but there was nothing to distinguish. No shapes, no shadows, just emptiness. And then the sound came. Not loud, not sudden, but impossible to ignore. A slow, rough dragging sound, like nails scraping across concrete. It came from somewhere to her left, maybe from the hallway, or behind her. It was hard to tell. The darkness had erased her sense of direction as well. Emily took a step back, trying to remember where she was. The sofa was right there. Right? The piece of furniture she could use as a shield, or at least as a point of reference. She extended a hand into the darkness and touched the fabric. Cold, still, real. But the sound continued. Closer, sharper. Now there was another noise mixed with the dragging. Something wet, almost sticky, like breathing, like saliva. Then a voice, low, almost smiling. "You turned off the light, Emily, but I can see in the dark." Emily backed up until her back touched the wall. And there, finally, she felt it. A breeze, cold, cutting, coming from the entrance. The door, which she had heard unlock by itself, was now open, and something had entered. The darkness was absolute. Not even the streetlight filtered through the windows. It was as if the darkness had swallowed everything around the house, a thick, impenetrable fog that closed off the outside world, making it unrecognizable, distant. The silence was total, dense, almost tangible, as if the house itself had isolated itself from everything, submerged in a deep, insurmountable void. Emily couldn't distinguish the space in front of her. Her eyes, already accustomed to partial darkness, could no longer adjust in any way. The hallway she knew so well seemed to have disappeared, and the air grew heavier with every breath she tried to take. It was as if every molecule around her was suspended, waiting, watching. She took a step forward. The sound of her feet on the floor seemed deafening, as though she were walking through an empty room. Or maybe it was the feeling of being watched that made everything around her feel amplified, as if the very space itself were vibrating with an invisible presence. Suddenly, a whisper, low, almost inaudible, but unmistakable. "You can't leave." Emily stopped, her breath frozen. The voice came from all sides, from within the house itself, as if the walls had become oracles. She swallowed hard, fear invading her body, paralyzing it. There was no one there. It wasn't possible. The house was empty, was it? The sound of something dragging on the floor cut through the silence. Something heavy, dragging slowly, but with an unsettling precision. The feeling that something was there with her, close enough to feel its breath, although nothing was visible, became unbearable. The living room door, which had seemed securely closed before, creaked, slowly, as if being pushed by an invisible force. Emily stepped back, her heart beating erratically, and then, at the back of the room, a faint light appeared, like a small point on the horizon of darkness. It was a small glow, but growing, like a flame about to ignite. But as she approached the light, she realized it wasn't a flame, it was an eye, watching her. Emily froze. The only thing she could hear was her own breath, short, rapid, and a very low hum coming from nowhere. It was a strange metallic sound, as if an unusual frequency was hovering in the air, but with no apparent source. The echo of this hum seemed to permeate the house, filling every corner, every empty space. She didn't know if the sensation was caused by fear or something else, something she couldn't understand. The air around her felt heavy, charged with a palpable tension. It was as if the house were alive, breathing with her, as if it were waiting, preparing for something. Emily didn't dare move. The environment was so immersed in darkness that she couldn't distinguish where the room ended and where the void began. Everything seemed suspended at a point of waiting, as if the world outside had simply stopped. Then, the light again, a faint flickering glow, a diffuse reflection in the corner of the room, near the sofa. It wasn't the light she knew. It was a murky, distorted light, as if something were trying to manifest through it, unsuccessfully. The hum intensified, becoming louder, more oppressive, filling the house in a way that was almost physical. It felt like the very electrical wires were vibrating, as if the house's energy were being sucked somewhere far away. That's when she heard the whisper. It was soft, almost like a breeze, but the words were clear, direct. "You shouldn't have turned off the light, Emily." The voice came from all sides at once, wrapped in a calm, assured malevolence, as if it knew something Emily didn't yet understand. She quickly turned, trying to identify the source of the voice, but the room remained empty, the darkness swallowing everything. The hum was now so loud it felt like the very pulse of the air. Emily took a step back, not knowing where to go. Her senses were completely overloaded, and the feeling that something was there with her, watching her, became unbearable. The fear was no longer just an instinct. It was something deeper, more primal, making her feel as though her very presence in the house was a violation. She needed to leave. But when her eyes searched for the door, she noticed something that made her stop instantly. The doorknob was moving, very slowly. Then Alexa spoke again, without being turned on, without command. It just spoke. "You called me. Now I'm here." The voice was the same, familiar and emotionless, but there was something strangely distorted about it. The perfect punctuation, the impersonal tone, but what it was saying seemed to carry a weight that didn't fit that technology. Emily looked at the device, which was completely off, the light ring gone. Alexa shouldn't have spoken, not like that. The silence that followed was heavy, thick, as if the house were waiting, listening. Emily felt a chill run down her spine, the sensation that the reality around her no longer followed the same rules. She looked at the door, trying to decide whether to run or confront the strange voice that seemed to be taking control of the house. She tried to speak, but her throat was tight, airless. Fear had paralyzed her. She could no longer distinguish what was real and what wasn't. "You called me, and now I'm here to finish what we started." The voice was softer, almost a whisper, but it spread throughout the room, reverberating off the walls, invading every corner of the house, as if there were no place to hide. The feeling of being watched intensified. It was as if something were everywhere at once. Inside the house, inside her mind, inside her body. The air felt heavier with each word. Emily took a hesitant step toward Alexa, the feeling of having no control over anything growing with every second. Her feet felt frozen to the ground, the tension rising like a tide. She didn't want to ask, but the voice in her mind urged her to do so. "What do you want from me?" she murmured, her voice almost breaking. The response was instant, and again it came from Alexa, but also from the entire environment, as if the walls themselves had spoken. "You know what we did. What you asked me to do. You just need to remember." The hum began again, louder, closer. Now Emily knew. It wasn't just Alexa that was speaking. It was the house. It was alive in a way she had never imagined. She wanted to run, but something kept her in place, her eyes fixed on the dark screen. The door to the hallway creaked, and the doorknob turned slowly. The presence was closer than she had ever imagined, and somehow it was waiting for her. A crack came from the ceiling, then another, like wood being crushed, or footsteps, heavy and slow, echoing through the house, making the air feel even more tense and suffocating. Emily stopped in the middle of the room, her feet frozen, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, trying to make sense of what she had just heard. The sound was clear, distinct, but how? She was alone in the house. There was no one else. And yet, the cracks continued, louder now, closer, as if something was moving up there, near the attic, pushing the wood with a weight that shouldn't exist. She swallowed hard, the air becoming heavier, as if the house itself were breathing with her. The cracks wouldn't stop, and the hum that had once seemed distant was now louder, more unbearable, as if the walls were vibrating with the pressure of something invisible. Each crack seemed like a hammer blow to Emily's sanity, making her stomach churn. She didn't know if she should go up there, investigate, or if she should run out of the house and never return. But then, the footsteps began. Slowly, deliberately. Emily didn't dare look at the stairs leading to the second floor, but her ears betrayed her, picking up every movement, every echo, as if someone was descending, slowly, towards her. But the stairs were empty. There was no one. She knew that. And yet the sound of heavy, dragging footsteps grew closer. Each step seemed to weigh more than the last, as if the person or thing making them was carrying the weight of the world on its shoulders. The house seemed to have turned into a trap. Emily tried to move, but fear paralyzed her legs, turning each motion into a battle. She wanted to run to the door, escape it all. But something, an invisible force, seemed to hold her feet in place as if the house wouldn't let her go. The footsteps were now downstairs. Close. Emily turned toward the hallway. The sound was so near that she could feel the pressure of the air moving with each step. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to summon courage, and it was in that moment, as the hum continued, that the voice returned, softer, darker, more intimate. "You called me, Emily. Now you will find me." Silence followed, broken only by the sound of something scraping against the wall, a continuous noise, like nails scratching the wood. Emily knew she wasn't alone anymore. Something was there, and it was waiting. The floor trembled beneath her feet, a subtle tremor, but impossible to ignore, as if the foundations of the house were about to give way to some invisible force. Emily gripped the banister of the stairs, her fingers pressing into the wood so hard that her nails scraped the surface. The air around her was dense, icy, as if the very atmosphere were compressing. And far off in the dark hallway she heard a sound, something dragging, slowly, as if it knew exactly where she was. The sound was soft, but it dragged through the house with a persistence that seemed calculated. It was as though something heavy was being moved, a large rough object that could barely move without leaving a trail. The dragging grew louder with each passing second, traveling down the hallway, drawing closer with an unrelenting precision. Emily swallowed hard, her eyes fixed on the dark space ahead. She couldn't see anything, but she knew. She knew that, somewhere in that darkness, something was moving toward her. The feeling of being watched, of being hunted, intensified with every movement of whatever was in the hallway. The house, the very house itself, now felt like a prison, its walls and corridors designed to keep everything inside. And her too. That thing, that was approaching with a disturbing calmness. No rush, as if it knew Emily had nowhere to go, that she had no choice. Each dragging step seemed to amplify the feeling of inevitability that settled in her chest. The sound was now very close, almost beside the bedroom door. Emily's breath became shaky, halting as she tried to figure out what she could do. There was no more time. Something was there, inside the house with her. Something that didn't belong to the real world, that didn't follow the rules Emily knew. And then, the sound stopped. The dragging ceased abruptly, but the silence that followed was more terrifying than any noise. It was the silence of something waiting, watching, something that knew exactly what she was feeling and what she was thinking. Suddenly, the voice returned. Not from Alexa, not from any physical place, but directly in her mind. "I found you, Emily." The air around her seemed to contract even further, and at that moment, the last thing she heard was the sound of something dragging again. But now it was inside the room, only a few feet from her. It was too late to run. Emily ran to the bedroom, locked the door with trembling hands, and pressed her body against it, trying to control the panic that nearly consumed her. Her breathing was erratic, her chest rising and falling forcefully. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to calm her mind, trying to understand what was happening, but everything seemed so distorted, so out of place, that logic seemed to no longer apply. The phone. She needed help. A call, a message, anything. She stepped away from the door and grabbed the phone from the bedside table. The device was cold, inert. Emily pressed the power button quickly, desperately, but the screen remained black, with no sign of life. She tried connecting it to the charger, but the screen didn't respond. Nothing. No light, no signal. The house was silent again, but it was a silence far from comforting. The sound of her own heartbeat seemed deafening, filling the night in an almost unbearable way. She felt the weight of the darkness around her, as if she were being swallowed by something larger than her perception, something vast and incomprehensible. She looked at the corner of the room. Everything was as it always had been, but the feeling that something had changed, that she was being watched, wouldn't leave her mind. The walls, the ceiling, the floor, everything seemed more closed in, tighter. The air was heavy, dense, as if the house itself was breathing, waiting. The creaks, the footsteps, the buzzing. Now everything was in absolute silence. But something in her mind told her the worst was yet to come. Something was approaching. Something that didn't care about locked doors, walls, or distance. Something that had found its way inside, somehow. She heard the sound of a whisper. Low, coming from inside the house, from nowhere, and from everywhere at the same time. "It's no use hiding, Emily. I'll always be here." The voice seemed to be part of the house itself, as if it had come from the walls, the floor, the air. It was no longer a human voice. It was something older, deeper, something that knew her name, something that had been watching her since the moment she stepped into that house. Emily turned toward the window, but the darkness outside was total, as thick as the one inside the room. She couldn't see anything. No stars, no streetlights. Everything was consumed by a dense, suffocating shadow. The weight on her chest grew heavier. Something was out there. Something was waiting. And now, something was inside too. With a stifled scream, she threw herself to the floor, desperate for an escape. But there was nowhere left to go. She was trapped. The house had become a prison, and Emily knew the key to freedom was no longer in her hands. Outside, an unnatural silence, almost hostile. The darkness seemed thicker than ever, as if the very air had turned into a dense, impenetrable mass. Emily stood still, pressed against the bedroom door, trying to hear any sound that could indicate she was still safe. But nothing. No street noise, no wind. Just an absolute emptiness, as if the world outside had vanished, leaving only the house and her, alone, isolated. Fear began to spread from within, like a growing fever, making her skin tingle and her heart race again. She looked at the phone in her hand, still dead, still useless. Nothing. There was nothing left, except that oppressive silence. And then, the voice returned, closer, clearer. Now, it seemed to come from behind the door. "You should have listened to me before." The words whispered with a cold calmness, as if the being speaking them already knew what was about to happen. It was a low voice, devoid of emotion, but laden with something else. Something ancient, something that knew more than it should. Emily stepped away from the door, panic tightening her throat. Each word seemed to crawl across the wood, as if the door itself were alive, pulsing, vibrating with the presence of what was on the other side. The air grew even colder, and a sense of claustrophobia overtook Emily. She looked around the room, desperate for an escape, but there was none. No window open, no crack through which she could slip away. The door was the only thing between her and whatever was behind it. The voice continued, louder now, almost like a whisper in her ear. "I warned you, Emily. You shouldn't have tried to forget me." The buzzing sound returned, softer but unmistakable, reverberating through the walls. It was as if the house itself were alive, as if it were part of this, complicit with the presence now manifesting more clearly. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She no longer knew what was real and what wasn't. What was happening didn't seem to fit any known logic. The silence returned for a moment, but it was even heavier. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl, that swallows any thought, any movement. Emily looked at the door, waiting, dreading the next sound. And then, with terrifying precision, the doorknob began to turn. From within the house, from within herself, a laugh started to form. Low, distant, but growing, like a shadow taking shape. The door was about to open. The laughter echoed again, but this time, from every corner of the house, as if Alexa was no longer in the device, but spread across the walls, through the shadows, as if her voice had infiltrated the very structure of the house. Each laugh seemed to come from a different point. The kitchen, the hallway, the ceiling, the floor. An increasing echo, interrupted by an electronic distortion that made the laughter sound more and more unsettling, almost macabre. Emily didn't know where to look anymore. The sound seemed to invade her mind, sinking deeper into her consciousness, as if she were being consumed by the house itself. The wall in front of her trembled slightly, as if it were trying to speak, as if it were part of something much larger, something she couldn't comprehend. She took a step back, but the air felt thick, heavy, as if the house was holding her in place. Emily's breathing became more labored, more difficult. Every strand of her sanity seemed to unravel slowly. What was happening? How could Alexa, that small voice device, be doing this? It was no longer connected. There was no sign of life coming from it anymore. The laughter continued, but now it wasn't just a sound. It was a presence that was inside her, inside the house, inside everything. Emily felt a chill run up her spine, her body frozen by a primal fear that paralyzed her. Each laugh seemed more personal, more directed at her, as if the thing on the other side knew exactly what she was feeling. Every tremor, every thought. Suddenly, the buzzing returned, louder, more intense, and the light on the ceiling flickered, weak, as if it were struggling to resist an unknown force. Then, the voice spoke again. But now it was more than words. It was as if everything around her was speaking with the same voice, in unison, carrying an unbearable power. "I am the house, Emily, and you belong to me." The phrase reverberated through the walls, the floor, the ceiling, as if it were part of something immense, something far beyond any human comprehension. The air became unbearable, thick with a pressure that felt like it was crushing Emily's lungs. She tried to scream, but her voice wouldn't come out. Everything was becoming a mass of sound, distorted light, laughter, and echoes that enveloped her completely, leaving her with no escape. She turned toward the bedroom door, but something kept her from reaching it. The hallway seemed farther away, wider now, as if the house was expanding, becoming an endless maze, and the laughter never stopped. "You called me. Now there is no way out." The sound seemed to come from inside her, as if it were a reflection of her own mind, but she knew it wasn't. Something was there, at the center of everything, something that had found her, and now there was no way to escape. A blue light glowed under the door, faint, pulsing, like a heartbeat of something that was not human. Each pulse of light seemed to vibrate in the air, sending cold waves across the room, making Emily's blood run slower, as if time itself was being distorted. The light spread slowly, unevenly illuminating the floor, as if it were alive, expanding with intention, crawling toward her like a predator closing in. Emily stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the door. The sound of laughter had ceased, but now there was another presence, something denser, more solid, almost tangible. The hum in the air grew louder, so low it seemed to come from inside her own head, blending with the pulsating light, which now seemed to have its own rhythm. And that rhythm was threatening. The light was not normal. It didn't flicker like a dying bulb. It wasn't an emergency light trying to survive. It was something more, something that was feeding off the darkness, the stillness, as if it were part of the house, as if it were part of what the house had become. Emily took a hesitant step back, feeling the weight of the tension crushing her shoulders. Her mind was in conflict, trying to rationalize what was happening. But there was something lodged in her throat, a sense of urgency, as if she were about to be consumed by something far greater than she could comprehend. The pulsating light intensified, and for a moment it seemed as though the door, with its cold metallic doorknob, was warping, as if something were trying to escape from within the house, from the very heart of the structure. She looked at the phone again, hoping for a miracle. But it was dead. There was no way out. And then, the voice returned. It was no longer Alexa. It was no longer a machine trying to communicate. It was something different, something deep, primal, coming from beyond the house, from the walls, from something that fed off the very essence of the night. You don't understand, Emily. You never will. But it doesn't matter. I am here. And now, it's too late. The air grew denser. Emily felt as though she were being pulled to the floor, as if an invisible force was drawing her to a fixed point, to a center she could not see, but felt with all the intensity of her being. The glow of the light grew brighter, stronger, and at the center of the light, a shadow began to form, taking shape, as if a figure were materializing out of nowhere. Emily didn't know what to expect. She didn't know what was real anymore and what wasn't, but she knew she had no choice left. The door trembled, as if something was about to open, and the light pulsed like a heart, like that of something that should never have been awakened. Emily closed her eyes and curled up, trying to protect herself from the growing presence, from the overwhelming sensation that crawled through the room like a living shadow. Her body trembled, but the cold she felt didn't come just from the air. It was something deeper, something that rooted itself in her soul, something that couldn't be driven away with simple movements. The sound of her heart beating uncontrollably now seemed to echo through the house itself, amplified, as if the house was listening, waiting. She tried to convince herself that she could fight, that she could find a way out, but something inside her knew that there was no escape anymore. The blue light pulsed relentlessly under the door, like a macabre beacon, while the echoes of the laughter, now distorted, blended with the hum filling the air. Everything was closing in, as if the house itself had become a trap. The floor seemed to tremble again, and the air around her grew denser, warmer. But all she wanted was to disappear, to vanish, to flee from what was approaching, from the growing weight of the presence filling every corner of the space. She squeezed her eyes shut tightly, trying to block out the fear, trying to escape the reality that was suffocating her. But then, the voice came. Her voice, distorted, cold, laden with a sickening calm that made her bones freeze. Now that I've entered, I'll never leave. The words floated in the air, whispered with a terrifying intimacy, as if the thing behind the door knew everything about her, every fear, every doubt. It wasn't a common threat. It wasn't something she could simply face or run from. It was a sentence, a condemnation, a promise. And the dread consumed her chest like an unstoppable force, tightening her insides. Emily's eyes slowly opened, but she didn't want to see. She didn't want to understand what was there, what was forming, what was approaching. The room was darker now, not because the light had gone out, but because the darkness itself seemed to have thickened, come to life, overtaken the space. The house, the place she knew, the place where she should have felt safe, was now against her. It was no longer a home, it was a prison. And the entity, whatever it was, now belonged to it. It was part of everything around her. The last thing Emily felt was a growing pressure in the air, as if an invisible hand was squeezing her throat. The heat intensified. The house breathed, and she, now completely immersed in that darkness, knew there was no escape left. She was no longer alone, and she would never be again. The presence was inside her.